The forest was quiet, the trees stretching high above, their shadows growing longer as the sun started to set. The air was cool, filled with the smell of pine and earth. Deep inside the forest, a small child walked alone, their heart racing with fear. The child had wandered too far from the family camp and now felt completely lost. The excitement of exploring the woods earlier in the day had quickly turned to panic. The once inviting forest now felt dark and scary. Each step the child took seemed to echo in the stillness, and every rustle of leaves or distant sound made them jump. Where were their parents? Why hadn't anyone come to find them? The child had made a mistake, a small slip in judgment. They'd wandered off, thinking they could find their way back, but now, as the light faded, they were surrounded by trees, with no path in sight. The child's breath came quicker, their thoughts racing. They couldn't remember how to get back, and the forest felt bigger and more dangerous with every passing second. But the child wasn't alone. Not far away, hidden in the shadows of the trees, a mother bobcat watched. Her golden eyes followed every movement the child made. She was a wild animal, strong and careful, used to being on her own. She had no reason to help. But something about the child's fear caught her attention. The bobcat was used to her quiet, peaceful life in the forest, but now, as she listened to the child's cries, a feeling she didn't expect took over. She felt the need to do something, to protect the helpless little one. She stayed hidden in the shadows, watching closely, waiting for the right moment. She was careful, not sure why she felt so drawn to help this lost child, but she knew she had to act. The child didn't know it yet, but someone was watching. Help had come, not from their parents or any human, but from the wild itself. The bobcat, moving silently and smoothly through the forest, decided to guide the child back to safety. She was about to do something unexpected, something that would change everything for both of them. The child took another few trembling steps, their heart racing as the sound of the forest seemed to close in around them. They had tried calling for help, but the only response was the echo of their own voice. The shadows were growing longer, and the temperature was dropping. The child's legs ached, and tears welled up in their eyes. They didn't know how much longer they could keep going. Meanwhile, the mother bobcat moved silently through the underbrush, her eyes locked on the child. She stayed hidden, watching from a distance. The bobcat's instincts were sharp. She knew the woods like the back of her paw. She had survived in these woods for years, hunting and protecting her own. And right now, she was watching a creature in need, a creature unlike any she had encountered before. The child, small and vulnerable, was struggling in a way the bobcat understood too well. Survival in the wild was about making the right choices, trusting your instincts and staying safe. But the child seemed lost, and without help, they wouldn't survive the night. The bobcat's thoughts were simple. There was no room for hesitation in the wild. Yet, as she watched the child stumble through the woods, something about the scene felt different. This wasn't just another animal lost in the woods. This was a creature that had no idea how to survive on its own. It was scared, alone, and far from safety. The bobcat paused. She could have turned away, leaving the child to wander aimlessly. But she didn't. She stepped forward, her paws light against the forest floor, moving with a grace that made no sound. Her body stayed low, almost invisible in the twilight. The child hadn't noticed it yet, still lost in their own panic. But the bobcat's instincts told her to be patient, to wait for the right moment. The mother bobcat was cautious. She had to be. The forest could be a dangerous place. She had learned that over the years. Her sharp eyes darted to the shadows, watching for any sign of danger that might lurk in the darkness. But the child wasn't a threat. She could see that now. The child was weak, fragile, and vulnerable, and the forest had no mercy for creatures like that. So, the bobcat did what her instincts told her to do. She moved closer, keeping a safe distance, but never losing sight of the child. There was a pull in her chest, a strange need to make sure the child didn't wander too far into forest grasp. As the child continued walking, unaware of the bobcat's presence, The mother bobcat quietly followed, staying just behind, a silent protector in the darkening woods. The bobcat wasn't sure why she was doing this. It wasn't like her to get involved with anything outside of her own survival, but the child was different. She could feel that, and so she kept following step by step, just close enough to keep watch, but far enough to remain hidden. The bobcat's instincts told her that the child was important, and maybe, just maybe, she could help. The child's steps slowed, exhaustion beginning to take its toll. Their small body ached with every movement, their head spinning with dizziness and fear. The shadows in the trees seemed to shift, and the once welcoming sounds of forest now felt threatening. But amid the growing panic, something strange began to happen. The child could sense they weren't completely alone anymore. There was a presence, a quiet, watchful figure just beyond the edge of their vision. For a moment, they thought it might be their parents. Maybe someone had finally found them. But when they turned around, all they saw was a darkening forest, the trees looming like silent giants. But the bobcat, hidden in the shadows, continued to follow, her movements smooth and calculated. She stayed just close enough to guide the child, but never too close to reveal herself. The child, too tired to feel fear, was beginning to trust a presence that seemed to be leading them forward. There was something calming about it, something steady, and though they couldn't see it, the bobcat's presence was like a silent promise, a reassurance that they weren't truly alone. The bobcat knew the forest better than anyone. She had walked its paths, climbed its trees, and hunted its prey for years. She could tell where the dangers lay, where the terrain was too rough, and where predators might be lurking. As the child stumbled forward, the bobcat guided them with gentle precision, staying ahead just enough to avoid being seen, but close enough to ensure the child's safety. The forest was vast, but the bobcat knew every inch of it. She led the child along a path that twisted through dense underbrush and between towering trees, carefully avoiding areas where ground was uneven or where dangerous animals might be waiting. She kept them away from the rocky slopes and the thick, thorny bushes that could tear at the child's skin. At one point, the child's foot caught on a hidden root, and they stumbled forward, nearly falling face first onto the forest floor. But just before they hit the ground, they felt something warm and strong brush against their side. It was a bobcat, guiding them, offering a quiet, unseen support. The child straightened up, still unsure where the help was coming from, but somehow knowing that the invisible guide wouldn't let them fall. The bobcat never stopped watching. Her golden eyes scanned the path ahead, always alert, always prepared. Every now and then, she would pause to listen, her ears twitching at every rustle in the woods. Once, when a distant howl echoed through the trees, she immediately veered the child away from the path, choosing a safer route around the predator's territory. But even as she guided the child to the forest, the bobcat's heart was heavy with the weight of the unknown. She knew that as long as the child was with her, they were safe from the dangers that lurked deeper in the woods. But the farther they went, the closer they would get to the edge of the forest, and eventually the child's family. The bobcat had no way of knowing if the child's parents were even nearby, or if they were still searching. But she was determined to help the child get to safety, wherever that might be. The forest had never felt more alive. The night was drawing in, and the creatures of the woods began to stir, their eyes glowing in the darkness. The child didn't know it, but with every step, they were closer to being found. They didn't know who or what was guiding them, but they felt it, an invisible thread pulling them forward, away from fear and uncertainty, towards safety and home. And with that, the child kept walking, step by step, toward a light at the end of the forest. They didn't know where they were going, but somehow they felt as though they were being led by something that cared, something that wouldn't let them fall. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft, silvery light across the forest. The deep blue of the evening sky slowly gave way to the quiet darkness of night. As the child moved through the woods, each step felt more labored than the last. Their small feet were sore, their legs heavy, and every breath felt like a struggle. The cold air bit at their skin, but they barely noticed. It was the exhaustion that gnawed at them. They had been walking for what seemed like hours, the weight of loneliness pressing down on them with each passing minute. The forest, once a place of adventure and mystery, had turned into an endless sea of trees, shadows, and strange sounds. Every rustle in the underbrush made the child jump, their heart racing as their mind conjured images of predators lurking in the dark. They had lost track of time, the sun having long since disappeared, and with it, the hope that someone would find them before the darkness consumed the world around them. But there was something different now. As the child stumbled through the forest, they felt a presence, a quiet, watchful energy that lingered just beyond their reach. It was subtle at first, a feeling more than anything, like the soft brush of air against their face or the fleeting touch of something unseen. The child had grown so tired that they could barely keep their eyes open, but that presence kept them moving forward, as though urging them to keep going, even when everything inside them screamed for rest. And then, as if their mind had conjured it, the child saw it. Movement, shapes through the trees just ahead. Their heart leaped in their chest, hope blooming within them like a flame after hours of darkness. Could it be their parents? Were they finally here, searching for them after all this time? The child's pace quickened as they took a few stumbling steps forward. Their body trembled with the effort, and their feet felt like they were made of stone, each step sending sharp pangs of pain up their legs. The trees seemed to shift, the shadows deepening, but the figures ahead were clearer now. They were human shapes, and the child could see their parent among them. Frantic, desperate, searching. The sight of them, the figures they had longed to see, made the child's heart swell with relief. Tears welled in the child's eyes, and before they could call out to them, their legs gave way. They collapsed onto their knees, the weight of exhaustion finally taking hold. They were so close now, so close to being safe. The pain in their body, the fear in their heart, all seemed to melt away as the child struggled to catch their breath. They wanted to shout, to run, to be held in the arms of their parents, but all they could do was kneel there in the soft glow of moonlight, barely able to move. But then, just as the child was about to stand, there was a sound, a soft rustle from the forest, a low, almost imperceptible noise that sent a chill through the child's spine. They looked over their shoulder, expecting to see one of the figures who had been searching for them. But there was nothing. The forest was still. No movement, no sound, except for the slow rustling of leaves in the wind. The child turned back toward the figures ahead, but something caught their attention out of the corner of their eye. There, just beyond the edge of the trees, they saw a movement, a shadow slipping through the darkness, just beyond their reach. Golden eyes glinted in the dim light, watching them from a distance. For a brief moment, the child froze. They had no idea what it was, but a feeling of recognition washed over them. It was the same presence they felt earlier, the same quiet protector guiding them forward. The child's breath hitched. What was it? Who or what had been following them? Could it have been the same creature that had kept them moving all this time? They didn't know, but the warmth in their chest, the sense of comfort and safety, told them that this creature wasn't a threat. It was something else, a force of nature, perhaps, or a silent protector. The child couldn't explain it, but in that moment, they felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, of relief. And then, before they could process what they had seen, the movement disappeared. The golden eyes vanished back into the shadows, leaving the child to wonder if they had imagined it. But something deep inside them told them they hadn't. The Bobcat had been there, watching over them every step of the way. In the meantime, the child's parents had reached them, their faces full of disbelief and relief. They wrapped the child in their arms, holding them tightly, their voices trembling with emotion as they asked over and over if they were all right. The child could hardly answer. The exhaustion was overwhelming, and the weight of the ordeal felt too heavy to put into words. But they felt the warmth of their parents' embrace, and for the first time in hours, they felt safe. "Where were you?" the father whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been looking everywhere. You're safe now. We're here." The child's tears flowed freely, and they clung to their parents, the fear of the past hours slowly fading. But in the back of their mind, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had been with them, something that had helped them, kept them going when they thought they couldn't take another step. As the family hugged, tears mingling with smiles, the child stole one last glance over their shoulder. The bobcat was gone, vanished back into the woods, her golden eyes a distant memory. The child would never truly know who or what had guided them home, but they would never forget the feeling of being watched over, the strange comfort in the darkness. The family, reunited and safe, made their way out forest. The night seemed quieter now, less threatening. The child held on to their parents, finally able to relax, knowing they were no longer lost. But in their heart, they carried a memory of the silent protector, the bobcat whose eyes had guided them when no one else could. The family walked in silence, the child tucked safely in their arms as they moved closer to the edge of the forest. The once terrifying woods now seemed less menacing, bathed in the soft light of the moon that filtered through the gaps in the trees. With each step they took, the child felt the weight of the ordeal beginning to lift. But deep inside, a part of them remained tethered to the events that had just unfolded. The shadows of the forest still lingered in their mind, the sounds of the woods still ringing in their ears. But more than anything, the child couldn't stop thinking about the presence that had been there with them. The golden eyes, the feeling of being watched over, the silent guide that kept them moving forward when they thought they couldn't go on. The child would never truly understand what had happened that night, nor would they be able to explain why it had been the bobcat, a wild animal, who had come to their aid. But they felt a deep, unspoken connection to creature. Something inside them knew that the bobcat had done more than simply guide them home. She had shown them something far more important. In the days that followed, the child found their mind wandering back to that moment in the woods, replaying the events in their head over and over. They would find themselves walking along the edge of the forest with their parents, gazing into the trees, half expecting to see the bobcat's golden eyes watching them from shadows. They would stop, listening intently, as if hoping for a sign that the creature was still out there, still watching, still protecting. But the bobcat was gone. The woods were quiet again, and the child never saw the creature again. Still, the feeling lingered. It was as if something had changed inside them. The fear that once gripped their heart when they thought the forest had faded. Now, there was a new sense of wonder, a deeper understanding of the woods and the creatures that called it home. The child began to realize that the forest, once a place of danger, was also a place of life, full of creatures who, despite their differences, shared the same world. It wasn't just a dark, scary place where lost children wandered. It was a living, breathing part of the earth, a place where survival and compassion existed side by side. And yet, the child's thoughts would often return to the bobcat. They didn't know much about her, only that she was wild, untamed, and yet had chosen to help him in their time of need. The child couldn't help but wonder what had driven her to act. Was it instinct? Was it a deeper, unspoken connection to another living being? The child would never know the answer. But what they did know was that the bobcat had given them something far more precious than a mere rescue. She had given them a lesson in kindness, selflessness, and the importance of stepping forward when the need arises. The child's parents, of course, never learned the true story. They had been too focused on the relief of having their child back safe and sound. They had hugged the child tightly, asked if they were okay, and promised never to let them out of their sight again. But they never spoke of the strange feeling the child had experienced in the woods, the quiet sense of being guided. To them, it had simply been a matter of luck that the child had made it back to them, nothing more. They had no idea that a wild creature had been the one to lead their child home. For the child, however, the story was more than just a tale to tell. It was a truth they held close to their heart. They couldn't explain it to anyone else, couldn't make others understand the deep sense of gratitude they felt for the bobcat. But it didn't matter. The child knew the truth in their soul. They had been saved not by a person, but by a wild animal, an unlikely hero whose only motivation had been to protect, to guide, and to help when no one else could. As the years passed, the child grew older, but the memory of that night stayed with them. They would find themselves sharing the story with friends and family, telling them about the mysterious creature who had stepped out of the shadows to help when help was needed most. Sometimes, their friends would listen in disbelief, shaking their heads, unable to understand how a wild animal could do such a thing. But the child didn't mind. They knew the truth. They knew what had happened that night, and they carried it with them always. Over time, the child developed a new respect for the wild, for the creatures that lived in the forest, and for the delicate balance that existed between all living things. They learned that nature, in all its beauty and danger, was not something to be feared, but something to be understood and respected. The bobcat had shown them that even in the wild, there could be kindness, there could be protection. And sometimes heroes didn't wear capes or badges. They simply stepped forward when the time was right, when their instincts called them to act. The child grew up with a deep connection to nature, always remembering the lesson the bobcat had taught them. The wild had its own way of balancing the scales of life. Sometimes the strong helped the weak, and sometimes it was the other way around. The bobcat had done what she had to do, without expecting anything in return. She didn't need recognition, and she didn't need thanks. In the wild, action spoke louder than words, and as the child grew into an adult, they often found themselves reflecting on that night in the woods. They had faced their fear and had been led to safety by something unexpected. It had been the bobcat's actions that had made all the difference, and it had been her quiet, protective nature that had shaped the child's view of the world. The memory of the bobcat would stay with them forever. It was more than just a rescue. It was a reminder that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. It was a reminder that heroes didn't always look like heroes. Sometimes they were wild and untamed, but they still had the power to change a life. The bobcat had changed theirs. As for the bobcat, her life continued in the forest, as it always had. She would never know the full extent of the difference she had made. But perhaps, in the quiet of the woods, she didn't need to. She had done what needed to be done, and that was enough. As the years passed, the child grew into an adult, forever carrying with him the lesson learned in the forest. The memory of the bobcat, her silent presence, her quiet protection, remained a constant source of inspiration. There was a strength that lived within the wild, a kind of wisdom that existed beyond human understanding. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all was that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, from the creatures we least expect. In a world full of noise and distractions, it's easy to forget that there are moments of quiet heroism all around us. The bobcat's act of kindness wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't require applause or recognition. It was simply an act of instinct, of care, when it was needed most. And perhaps that's what makes the world more beautiful, more connected. The small, unnoticed acts of compassion that happen every day, in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to change someone's life. What if, like the bobcat, we all chose to act when the need arises, without expecting anything in return? What if we all embraced the quiet strength that lies within us, and reached out to help others, even when they don't ask, even when it's difficult or inconvenient? What could we achieve if we all looked beyond ourselves and saw the needs of others, even in their darkest moments? Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Have you ever been guided through a difficult time by someone, or something you didn't expect? Have you ever been that silent hero for someone else, offering help when it was least expected, but most needed? Sometimes, the most meaningful connections come from the simplest acts, the quietest moments. This story, while about a lost child and a bobcat, is a reminder to all of us that compassion, courage, and help often come in the most unexpected forms. The wild teaches us that, while we may not always know who our protectors are, they may be closer than we think. They may be silent. They may be quiet. But they are always there when we need them the most. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own connections with nature or the silent acts of kindness you received, take a moment to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, the smallest stories have the biggest impact. And if you found something meaningful in this tale, share it, comment below, and reflect on how you, too, can become protector or find protection in the most unexpected places. Remember, just like the Bobcat, we can all choose to be heroes in someone's life, even if it's in ways no one else will ever see. The power of kindness, the courage to help, and the willingness to protect are what shape the world around us. So, as you move forward in your own life, remember that sometimes the wildest, most unexpected heroes are the ones who teach us the most. Will you be that hero for someone else?